There are certain things you must focus on during a chess game. In this video, I'm gonna share with you the practical tips that have been proven throughout 2 decades of my professional chess career to work best. And of course, I'm gonna show you how exactly you should use it during a real game. What's up, chess player, and welcome to the Journey to Grandmaster, the place where you can improve every single aspect of your chess game. So I'm in Munich right now, taking part in the Munich Open very strong chess tournament, and yesterday I played this fantastic game, the first round against Sebastian Hoffmann. He is the creator of one of the biggest German language chess channels, Schachmat TV. And not only that, he's also my teammate. We are playing for the same chess club, but this time we were playing against each other. So this game is incredible. I have managed to show such a high performance in terms of the accuracy of this game. I got like more than 96%. So let me walk you through and explain what exactly you should do in every step of the process to achieve such a result. So my opponent played as white, he played the move d4, and I played d6. This is what I normally do, this is what I understand very good. And that's maybe the first tip I want to give you. Like, you don't need to learn so many openings, you don't need to memorize so many variations like many people think. Instead, you really need to understand the position that you are playing. This game is a fantastic example for that, because my opponent played here knight to d2. And even though I'm playing this Philidor defense for many years, I have never seen this move knight to d2. I wasn't prepared at all. I mean, I knew, of course, that it can be that great if I don't know it, because, well, it's only move 3. But I still needed to do something, right? My opponent prepared this variation, he knew what to do, and I did it. But because I knew this type of position in general, because I understand the concepts, what are important here, I managed to get a good position out of it. First of all, I'm playing e5 as normally against the main move knight to c3. I want to fight for the center. It's always the most important thing to fight for the center. Whenever you're playing white or black, you don't need to give the full control to your opponent. So the center is basically these 4 squares, the big center is those 16 squares, and this is like the part of the board where all of the party happen. So I'm playing e5, my opponent plays e3 just to protect it. Now, I don't want to trade, also very important to understand, when you trade the pieces, you need to see whether you are exchanging a more active or a less active piece or pawn. So if I take this pawn, essentially I am exchanging this e5 pawn for the c3 pawn. And my pawn is much more important, it's in the center, and right now I have 2 center pawns against 2. But if I exchange those, then I'm gonna only have 1 against 2 of my opponent. Now, at some point, this is a legitimate idea, but not that early because I don't have any resources to counterattack. So instead, I'm playing the move g6. I want to develop my bishop, knight goes to d7, and my opponent takes immediately on e5. Now, that would be a good exercise for you. Do you take with the pawn or with the knight? Let me know in the comments what would be your choice, because I think taking with the pawn, even though it seems like it's fine, it feels a little bit scary here. At least that felt for me, because after bishop to c4, I immediately imagined some ideas like bishop takes f7, king takes, knight to g5, then queen to b3. And even though the computer says, no worries, that's completely winning for black, I mean, that doesn't feel that pleasant. And objectively there is the move knight to g5 here, creating a lot of problems. Then castles, knight d to f3, I mean, applying a lot of pressure here. I mean, I guess the threat is just to take on f7 and bring the second knight to g5. So it's not a situation you want to find yourself in. That is why I wanted to get a little bit more space for me and exchange my opponent's more active piece for my less active piece. That would also open up the bishop. So I'm taking with the knight. Now I'm fine both with knight takes e5. That's what happened, as well as with knight d4, because in this case my bishop is going to be very active along the diagonal. What happened is takes, and my opponent just continued the development, but it turns out, by the way, bishop g7 is more or less the only inaccuracy I have made in this game. The right move according to the engine is bishop to h6. And even though I might agree objectively that's a little bit better because I get more space, I would argue that practically it would be very difficult for me to win the game if I would have played bishop to h6. Because what would have happened is like castles, maybe knight, yeah, maybe you would prepare queen to e2, then knight f3, then those bishops are going to be exchanged. White will bring all of the rooks into the center. How do you win such a position? That's very tough. So I played bishop g7 instead. My opponent castles, and queen went to c2. Now it's a very good moment to come with a plan, like what do you do? And this is the second very important step. So the first one was to know your stuff in the opening. You don't need to memorize everything, you just need to understand where the bishops should go, why, and what are the ideas afterwards. So here I decided, well, I need to finish my development. Development is the most important thing in the opening and sometimes in the entire chess game. You absolutely need to invite everybody to the party. Otherwise, you're giving your opponent a huge advantage. Never underdevelop your pieces. Imagine how cool it would be to play chess without ever having opening troubles again. What if I told you I could teach you all openings you will ever need in just 10 days? You get lifetime access to more than 110 pure value video tutorials, almost 100 practical tasks to apply your knowledge immediately into practice, 30 plus bonus videos to dive 10 times deeper, as well as private community where all questions you might ever have are answered daily. Get the $200 limited time discount with the link in the description and forget about all opening pain once and for all. So this bishop on c8 is still not developed, and remember, you first develop the minor pieces, and normally your ideal goal should be to spend only one tempo on each piece. This way you develop as many pieces as fast as possible, and of course also try to choose the most active available squares for all of the pieces. So I had a plan here to play b6, bishop b7 and put some pressure on this e4 pawn, but it felt like I'm gonna be a little bit slow because I need to spend a lot of time for it, and this knight is already coming, attacking here, jumping to here. So I decided this bishop puts a lot of pressure on my position, so I just need to exchange it. I played queen to e7 with an idea to play bishop e6, and if my opponent wants to stop it, then I maybe have other ideas, like knight f3, I immediately have bishop g4, move rook d8, and so on. My opponent played a4, very smart idea, he wants to play b3, and bishop a3 just to attack both of my queen and rook, basically win an exchange. And that's exactly what he did, bishop e6, b3, and I just played rook d. I said, well, you want your bishop on a3, do it, but I'm gonna just ignore this diagonal completely, and then your bishop is pretty much useless on x3. So I thought it's a little bit less convenient for me if the bishop would be on e3, because here it would control pretty much all of the important squares. But here I have chances to improve my bishop there, maybe bring my knight. That's, by the way, exactly what I managed to execute in the game. So I should be fine without the control of this a3 f8 diagonal. Rook went to d8, to d1, sorry, and I played rook to d7. So there is only one open file in this position, the d file, and I want to place both of my rooks because, remember, rooks love the open files, and basically here you can already say I have equalized the position. When you're playing as black, if you're playing on more or less decent level, the first task is always to equalize the position, because we all know white is a little bit better from the beginning. So that's exactly what I did here, and now I'm starting to think, okay, how I can apply pressure on my opponent, because of course I want to eventually win the game. And so I decided if I'm gonna have two rooks along the d file, my opponent is only gonna get one, then I'm gonna get some initiative, some control of this central d file, which is of course very important. And also I'm gonna finish my development. That's exactly what I did here. All of my pieces are developed, and white's rook on a1 still doesn't really participate. So even though I'm playing as black, I already kind of got some leads in terms of the development. Well, in the meantime, my opponent has made a lot of pawn moves here, but I would argue this is not really something that helped him. In fact, what happened in the end of the day, those pawns became a weakness. So remember about it. Pawns never go back, and especially be very careful in terms of how you place your pawns in terms of the pawn structure, because what ended up happening, we both have now the dark squares bishop, and he placed his pawn on the dark squares. I mean, this is not a great thing, because at the end of the day, it's going to be a target. Let's see how I managed to use this opportunity for me. So he played knight to c4, and now I decided, well, I need to go forward. I need to create some pressure once again. Your main task in chess is to make your opponent's life as miserable as possible. This is the recipe for success. So when my pieces are standing here, they are, yes, very stable, but they are not really creating any real problems for my opponent, except for attacking for this e4 pawn, but I decided that's not enough. By the way, if you're thinking about this tactic here, knight takes e4, and then if queen takes, we are winning the rook. Unfortunately, our opponent can take first, and then it's not a checkmate. Now after queen to d1, if he takes, that would be a checkmate, but he can just play queen to e1 back, and we are just losing a piece and the game. So that doesn't work. I played the move knight to h5 here because I want to relocate it to f4, and that would create a lot of dangerous threats for my opponent. He plays rook to d7 and rook to d1. So obviously I have two rooks on the d file, he has only one. He wants to simplify the position and, well, basically deal with my attacking threats. But I just go forward. If you want, you can take the second rook too, but I'm gonna still control the d file and I'm gonna still apply some pressure. That's the main thing. You can see the evaluation is 0-0, but I would argue already at this point it's less convenient to play as white in this position because, well, you can imagine some threats going on for your king, whereas black's king is very, very solid here. So knight to e3, bishop goes to f8. So I decided that my bishop on g7 is the worst placed piece for me. And this is the question from the method of three very, very important questions. I have made an entire video about it over here. Definitely take a look. This is life-changing, incredible video. So this is one of those three questions. What is the worst placed piece? This is the bishop on g7, doesn't do anything because even if I go here, it's blocked by the knight, here it's blocked by the pawn. At the same time, this bishop is very active. If you imagine the rook's being traded and I want to somehow, I don't know, attack with my queen, then this queen will come to d8 and I'm gonna just lose due to a checkmate. Whereas if the bishops would be out of the board, then I'm gonna just play king g7 and there is no danger for my king. So that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm playing bishop to f8. Now my opponent has a choice whether he wants to exchange the bishops or just go back. I would argue it was better to exchange the bishops because you never want to go back. That's another tip. Whenever you have a choice and opportunity, just never go back. This is the rule by a pretty famous Bobby Fischer. So bishop goes to c1. Now I can immediately play bishop to c5, but the problem with that is my opponent can just take the rook and then play the move b4. And then either I should take here, which I didn't really like because then the bishop takes, attacks the pawn and the knight, and somehow I don't have any real active ideas. So I decided if my a7 pawn is a problem and if my bishop has no moves to go, let me just play the move a6. So that now I'm threatening the move bishop to c5, and then if you want to play b4, I'm gonna just step back on a7 and the bishop is still incredibly active. I mean, that's a monster there. So my opponent decided to stop that. He played takes and knight to c4. Now he's, well, that's basically a double threat. You always want to make those multi-purpose moves when you are making one move but create different problems for your opponent. He's attacking here the pawn on e5 and the knight on f4. But that move also has a drawback. I have queen to g4. I'm creating checkmate threat in one. What can be more active than that? So you have to do something about it. The idea of my opponent was to take. By the way, f3 is another opportunity, but then I thought I have bishop to c5 check, and if you go to f1, I have queen to h4. Now you always need to keep an eye on this f2 square. The pawn is also hanging. If you play g3, I have queen h3 check. I thought that's very annoying, although the engine still says 0-0-0, you can do anything. But from a human point of view, if you look at this position, I mean, that's very easy to imagine white making a mistake here and lose very quickly. So, for example, the best move, the only move to maintain equality is knight takes e5, allowing me to take there. I mean, this is so crazy. So instead of that, my opponent just played bishop takes f4. He wanted once again to simplify. I am taking here with the queen, and my opponent plays b4. That was his idea to stop the move bishop to c5, because otherwise, well, I have two active pieces. He doesn't have any threats. I'm in full control. So that makes sense. But I had an idea here to play f5. And I'm putting pressure on his position. I'm attacking the pawn, and you cannot exchange it because the knight on c4 is suddenly hanging. And if you play f3, which I was anticipating, then somehow I thought, well, those squares are now weak, and maybe I can play c5, applying even more pressure, and the engine says once again some crazy ideas. You need to play knight b6 to maintain equality, allowing queen to e1, e3 check, allowing to take here. I mean, this is very difficult. So my opponent made a mistake. Instead, he played g3 because that allows him to get some kind of safety, namely the endgame knight against the bishop, exchanging the queens. But the endgame is not good. This is the problem for Sebastian, for my opponent, because yes, those pawns are horrible, but it's very difficult to take one of them, because if you take the pawn on e5, then I'm gonna just play bishop g7, the knight is hanging, whenever you go, I take this pawn on c3, and remember what I told you about those pawns on the dark squares. Now, those are huge targets. It would be much better to have all of them on the light squares, then my bishop would have no chance, absolutely no chances to attack those pawns. So this is the difference. This is why you need to care about pawn structure so much. And if you play f4 trying to protect, well, the easiest way for me, I thought, is just to take and then bring my king, win the pawn, and pawn endgame with an extra pawn is always winning. So that's difficult. And my opponent decided to go for the second pawn after king to f1 and king to f7. He played knight d2, trying to get here. But the problem is I'm just much faster with my king. I don't care about the pawns. I'm not trying to save it. But what I did instead is centralizing your king. Please, if you're going to take one thing out of this video, take this one. Centralizing your king in the endgame is essentially important. It's like the most important part, because in the beginning of the game, you're trying to save your king. You treat it like your child. You don't want it to become a part of the war. But coming to the endgame, this little prince, you might say, is really becoming a powerful king. And this is the time to shine. So you want to really use it in the end of the day. And that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm attacking the knight here, and I'm going to c4. There is absolutely no way to stop that. I'm playing king to c4, king to e2, and now, of course, I need to create weaknesses in my opponent's camp. Otherwise, how do I win? So I'm playing the move c5. I'm applying pressure here, just creating a huge threat. You cannot ignore it. My opponent took it. Now bishop takes c5, and if you do nothing, then my idea is simple. Put the bishop back and then take the pawn either with the bishop or with the king. Anyway, I'm creating this distant passer, and that should be devastating together with this play with the bishop against the knight, because the bishop is stronger. It can control both sides of the board, unlike the knight. My opponent decided to exchange the knight for a bishop, but the problem is the pawn endgame is losing due to this distant passer. So my opponent plays king to e4, I'm taking the pawn, king takes, now I'm just stepping back. There is king to b5, but there is a very big difference here. I have calculated this variation, and the problem here is we are both creating the queens. The position is absolutely winning, but it's not so simple as I thought. So I needed to calculate that. I have seen this. And then I thought, well, the king is in the center of the board. It's going to go somewhere. And then, yeah, maybe with some checks, I can take this pawn. I'm going to have two extra pawns. But with the queens on the board, it's always so difficult to win. I mean, I know that so good. I never want to get such a position. Even if having two pawns, it's still very huge way to win the game. But it turns out I don't need to do that, because I have here the move queen to c6. And then you cannot avoid exchanging the queens. And once the queens are off the board, of course, I'm immediately winning. Unfortunately, thinking about the starting position here, before king to b5, I haven't found that. So you really need to calculate so deep. But I decided, why would I need to take that risk if I have a simple move king to b6? And here, if you try the same variation, then at the right point, I can just play king to c7 and stop that pawn. If you play f6, I just play king to d7. If you play king to e6, I just play king to d8. Once again, you're just not in time. I'm stopping your pawn, and then my pawn is promoted. And if you try to place the king on f7, then you are wasting so much time. And now I'm in time to just promote and still stop your pawn. So I decided this is much simpler to play king to b6. My opponent played king to d5. He decided to bring the king back. But the problem is, it's always a winning endgame with a distant passer. Please remember that distant passers is the coolest thing you might have in the pawn endgame, because it's pretty much impossible to deal with it. Into c4, I'm just playing b5, pushing the king back. Then I'm playing king to d5, and there is absolutely nothing you can do. King to c4, king to d3, h5, and I'm just coming to get those pawns. And the white king cannot do anything. My opponent played h4, and after king e4, he resigned. So this was the round number 1 of Munich Open. I hope you enjoyed this game. It was helpful for you to get to know those tips, and you're going to use it in your own. Today, I'm going to continue with round number 2 with another exciting game, and I hope for your support. Meanwhile, I totally recommend you take a look at this video where I explain you this method of 3 questions you should ask to find the best move in every possible chess position, as well as avoid blunders.